Welcome to the Consummate Athlete Podcast, where we explore what it means to be a well-rounded, happy, goal-crushing athlete. Every week, myself, sports journalist Molly Herford, and cycling coach and kinesiologist Peter Glassford interview experts and chat through all of your training questions. We're excited to have you along for the ride. Hello. Welcome back to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. Peter, how's it going?
It's going well. Yeah, we've been training away and enjoying the fall and, not super structured, but sort of keeping things rolling.
Oh, you're keeping things rolling. I still have my big race or I guess it's not a big race, but I still have a big race on tap.
That's true.
75 kilometers, and that's only 3 weeks away now. So that's getting a little close.
Even pushing your Saturday volumes are big.
Yeah.
A lot of 20+ mile Saturdays.
Yeah. This weekend's my last really big one before that race. So looking forward to kind of having this block over and kind of getting into the real swing of fall, which always does feel, you're right, a little more relaxed, a little more, less structure. You're right.
Well, we spoke about it. I look at that fall as it's a good time to mountain bike for fun and work on some skills, maybe still do a couple intervals, maybe a couple fun races. But then I'm also trying to get ready, strength training's more important and more consistent. I still find that for me that, I do more like an easy strength. So 5 times a week, about plus or minus. It depends a little bit with what training looks like and travel, but 5 days. So usually it's Monday to Friday, but sometimes I'll shift one of the days just to get a recovery day completely off and then have one on Saturday. And then running for me coming back in, just getting ready for when the weather is going to be poor. And if I still haven't decided if I'm going to actually do the running race or not.
Oh dear Lord.
Back and forth.
I mean, I feel like this is the kind of thing you caution clients about, but do as I say, not as I do, I suppose.
So there you go. But so far so good with the running. So I'm gradually easing into it.
To be fair, you do have enough of a running background that you are capable of doing this.
I don't know about 75K.
No, you're not doing the 75K. I don't know why you would even think that. At any rate, today is going to be a short episode because we are just really getting into some nuances around heart rate, just trying to kind of make this efficient. So definitely let us know over, on Consummate Athletes Instagram or whatever, if you like sort of these shorter Q&A episodes. That's really helpful information as we go towards fall and winter and sort of thinking about what we're doing.
And submit a very specific question when you say that you like that. That'll be helpful as well.
That would be helpful as well.
Yeah.
But before we get into our heart rate things, just a quick word from our sponsor, which is AG1. So fall, this is like cold and flu season. And let me tell you, I get very stressed about my immunity. So having AG1 every morning to get those vitamins, minerals, probiotics, prebiotics, adaptogens, of course, your greens, all of these micronutrients, all just in one shot, plus their vitamin D drops, really makes me feel like I am a little bit more on top of just trying to keep my immune system as high functioning as humanly possible, especially on these weeks of, doing 80, 90, 100 miles.
Well, and I'm excited. We're going on a week-long trip here, visiting some friends, doing some mountain biking, watching some of the World Cup mountain bike racing at Mount St. Anne. And I'm just excited. We have these travel packs, easy to pack, very slim in the van, and we can just bring those pre-portioned package with us on the trip.
Yes. So super convenient. And bonus, if you sign up now, you actually get 5 free travel packs plus a 1-year supply of immune supporting vitamin D. So take ownership over your health. Head to drinkag1.com/MollyH. So that's drinkag1.com/MollyH. We have that link in the show notes. I've actually heard from a few people. We have converted quite a few people to this being the only thing that they have in their supplement cabinet at this point, which love to hear because it's so easy to have that whole cabinet full. So keep your life simple, streamline everything. Definitely check out AG1. Heart rate. So this is actually a question I've been dealing with Bicycling Magazine a lot lately in some of the articles I've been doing, where I'll be writing about zone 2 or zone 3. And, I'll be talking about power, but then obviously not everyone has access to power. Or, for some people, their power and their heart rate zones, they're just kind of questioning, like, are they supposed to line up? Which are they supposed to follow in a workout? So I guess my first question for you, as far as these kind of like really specific heart rate nuances go, is assuming we have power and heart rate, which one are we supposed to be following for a workout? Obviously, ideally, they're aligned and your zones are basically the same, but which do you stick with?
Right. And you probably put feeling in there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's sort of those 3. And I think the best thing is to have all 3. But indeed, there's one should be sort of the leading metric depending on what you're doing. And again, some of this is philosophical, some of it is situational. You don't have them all in all situations.
So I'm going to give you the like quick.
Sure.
I'll give you an example. Okay, so say I'm doing a 40-minute tempo interval. And I'm, riding at say 180 watts, holding that steady. My heart rate is at 165. But suddenly I noticed that while my power is staying at that 180, my heart rate is creeping up to, 170, 173. Like we're getting higher. What do I do?
It's probably the most contentious one you could have picked. That good old middle ground. And this is one, you'd probably see it's contentious. So that you're going to see both sides. So there's probably your power side of the world. I don't know if you call this Andy Kogan or whoever, I don't put words under their mouth, but if you're a power oriented person, you just do your zone 3 interval and you'd hold 180 watts and you just ignore the fact that your feeling is increasing and it's becoming very hard. And then you might also choose to ignore the fact that your heart rate is becoming like race pace or threshold type heart rate. It's elevating as you hold steady power. Now, the other side of that coin, and I would say this is like a Steve Neal, like, sort of more physiological model, but again, I don't want to put words into anyone, but when we trained, Steve and I, and this is sort of that methodology where in tempo and endurance, you're using heart rate as the limit. And so what you're actually going to do is decrease the power until which time you've decided you've failed the workout, or that's sometimes people don't like that wording, but you've decreased say 5 or 10%. And then that's the end of the workout. You've challenged the system enough that that's the end of the tempo. And then what we would say is come back next week and maybe try again. And maybe you'd persist longer. And so we're trying to preserve performance longer and endure longer with stable performance.
Right. Now, if you're noticing this is happening like fairly frequently, to me, that also is a signifier. Like once in a while, I mean, there's so many factors. You might be getting a little sick. It might be super hot out. There might just, there's so many different things that can cause your heart rate to be doing a little wacky stuff. But I do think if this is happening every time you do a tempo ride or every time you're doing intervals, it might just be that your power is actually set too high. Because to me, while I think power is the objective measure, like the most objective measure you can have, heart rate is actually more of the dictator of like, is your body actually doing the thing?
Sure. And I do think the feeling's important. Like we used to do these big, long tempos and it just eventually it would start feeling like you were racing, and it's sort of like that endurance, maybe you could call it your aerobic threshold, would increase so much that it was really close to your threshold. And so like you're actually going quite hard and the fatigue is building, but then you might not even see, your heart rate might start being depressed. So it might actually not even be indicative, but then the feeling is just like, it feels like you're racing. But then you're also sort of slow, like you can't accelerate over that. So that's more on the macro, like, you might see that adaptation. I think if you were looking for like a short answer, you could put in a magazine. I would say that like anything that's more endurance oriented, so probably under that zone 3 in the 5 or 6 zone model, under that tempo range, I would go guide it by heart rate. So in heart rate, I would probably use like an 85% or an 83% we sometimes used of max heart rate. And then just let the power be what it is, and then just track that. And you should see that improves or that you can hold it for longer. Once you get into like harder stuff, then I would use either power or feeling. So you might do threshold intervals, zone 4 intervals in the 5 or 6 zone. You might do those like 2x20 at your threshold, 300 watts. And then you would just hold that and ignore. Like, I don't think you'd ever really you could look at heart rate afterwards, but I wouldn't necessarily. And then if you were doing like a VO2, zone 5 or, just hard stuff, then I would just do it by feeling, like get up the hill as fast as you can. And again, you can track performance, but that could be time on the segment or the hill. It could be power and how that's changing. But I would say with those, you sort of just are in there and finish the set. And that's the goal. The guidance there is finish. If it's 5x3, finish 5x3.
So, okay. Love it. Love it. Now, the caveat to all of this that we probably almost should have started with is so many people now have, whether it's an Apple Watch, a Garmin, like any of these fitness watches that are actually tracking heart rate, or any of these straps or rings or whatever. And a lot of them now can sync to your cycling computer. So I know this is something you've talked about with your clients a lot of the time. While while the heart rate tracking on the watch, during the day, like as you're just kind of going about your day, maybe even during your sleep, any of that kind of stuff, probably pretty accurate. But when it comes to in workout,
Mhm.
I would actually really recommend when you're riding not to be wearing a watch, just from a simple, like if you have hand numbness, often like there is something that's caused by, when you have your hands at this angle and you have like a watch on, we talk about gloves can even cause like the hand numbness.
I mean, let alone the tan you're going to get.
Oh yeah, the tan is just bad. So yeah, kind of speak to the actual like good data in terms of heart rate.
Yeah, my experience still is that stuff, especially for smaller people, if you have a bony wrist, it just doesn't measure very well, exercise heart rates, and when stuff's jiggling around, as it would be with a run or a bike. And your experience could be completely different. You can do whatever you want. But my suggestion to clients is that we use heart rate straps, the good old heart rate chest strap. And then we also are flexible that, there's obviously certain body types. There's people who wear, different clothing that doesn't jive with that, bras, obviously, like there's two straps. It would be quite uncomfortable. So we deal with
Highly
that.
recommend, by the way, if you are a woman cyclist who can get away with, like, I use a very, very soft bralette when I ride because of that, because that way it doesn't have a bottom strap. So that way, when I have the heart rate strap on, that's the only strap in that area.
Right.
I know it's very easy to end up with like ultra compressive bra, ultra compressive heart rate strap. Then you have like the bibs and basically this is why we can't breathe on the bike.
And this will keep evolving. I'm confident that we will get, a consumer product that's accurate. Like that's sort of the balance. Like I said to you the other day, like I think if you had $1 billion, you could make a device that worked well, but it's like when you're trying to make $100 wristwatch for someone that's going to measure, it's just hard to have hardware that's good enough. But that will evolve. And I do think there's some of the armbands now.
That's what I was just going to say.
And again, it sort of makes sense to me. Like I am not a tech person at all, but like it makes sense that there's more tissue up there and that we can maybe get a reading and just a bigger diameter.
Well, and it's moving much less on the bike.
Possibly,
right?
well, certainly on the bike. Yeah. And maybe jiggling around just less than it might jiggle around on your wrist, right? If you just think about how much your watch moves on your wrist, it just, to me, doesn't make a lot of sense. Again, your mileage may vary, but if you're really going to be in on heart rate and doing heart rate training, I think, we'll stick with that gold standard of the thing over top of your heart versus something that's like at distal, away from the actual heart. Like that's
right.
The chest strap is on top of the heart, right? Like it's sort of right on the thing.
We'll put a couple links to the ones that we like that we use in the show notes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's whole different ones, but yeah, that's the rough guidance. And again, if you just don't want to get frustrated or get misleading stuff, you referenced, we won't name the product, but the World Cup mountain biking, I think it was Puck Peters or something, they keep referencing her heart rate on the start of the race, and she's a young woman, and they're saying like her heart rate is 142 beats,
and then there's like kind of an awkward pause.
Yeah, she's been going super hard up a hill for 3 minutes while being chased by the 100 of the fastest women in the world, and it's like there's no possible way this person's heart rate is 140 and just staying steady. And so there you go. You can look that up. But I thought that was a great demonstration.
Mm-hmm. Now, the other variable about heart rate is it is not the same throughout our entire lives. So this is a question that you got from a client recently. Just kind of, heart rate's changing over the years. Your max heart rate's going to change, like
sure,
all of that stuff. So kind of speak to the good, the bad. Oh, and it's also going to change with fitness.
Well, of course. Yeah. And that's the one I like, but we all know that 220 minus your age, you've probably heard that to predict your max heart rate. It doesn't really work super well on the individual level because there's so much variation. But if you wanted to bet, like what that's meant to say is that if you take a bunch of 40-year-olds and you guess that their heart rate's 180, you're probably pretty close on most of them, but you're going to have a couple that are like, can hit 200 plus, a couple that are, for some reason, their heart rate's 150 is their max. And I see this with clients, right? I happen to be just about 40 and my max heart rate is probably 182, but it's been 182 to 186 for 20 years. And the story I told clients is after I did a few years of 1,000-hour, like big volume years, I actually saw a drop from maybe 196, 197 down to 185, 186. And then it stayed there for, like I say, for quite a number of years. And then in the last couple of years, it's been, a couple beats lower. And why did it drop? Like it's really just that like there's a stimulation, the heart grows, and these structural adaptations. They doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't probably even like months. It doesn't happen. This is like years of training consistency, and volume drives a lot of this. The heart adapts. So the heart gets bigger. It can pump more blood, but then it also loses some ability to, or it doesn't, it's not required to beat as fast, right? To get
Right.
the same. And that's sort of the idea, is that it's sort of like cadence, right? You can push down really hard on your cranks and you can pedal at a cadence. So if you do 100 RPM and you push down this hard, then you get this many watts. The heart is sort of similar in its cardiac output, that it can do a certain number of beats, and then it has a stroke volume. So the amount of blood every beat that gets pumped out, and then that's your cardiac output, which is then fed into, this is your VO2 max. And these things sort of derive from how much blood that pump can put through the system.
Sure.
So does that make sense? So as you get older, again, we start losing the ability for that heart to beat as fast. And there's a whole other world of stuff there we don't need to go into, but that we sort of understand that, like, 220 minus your age. Did I say 180? 220 minus your age. And then also with fitness, we generally will see the heart get bigger. So then you also see a bit of a decrease often, or just preservation. Like this may not change at all. And you may actually keep your heart rate up higher by training for longer, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Love it. But
I guess, sorry, the key thing then, though, is that the max heart rate doesn't go up as you get fitter. Like that would be odd.
Right.
Like there might be like a situation where that could happen, but like it's not really. So as you get fitter, you don't hit higher heart rates. You push more power, probably at about the same heart rate.
Yeah. So with the getting older, getting fitter, like both sides of that, how often do you think you should be like reassessing your heart rate zones, especially as they relate to power zones? Like it probably doesn't need to be a yearly thing unless there's something major that happened in that year.
Yeah.
But probably every few years, because even if you think about the age, like the 220 minus your age, so every 5 years, that's a change of, could be 5 beats.
I think when we're speaking to adults, like I don't know that I'm going to encourage you to go out and just like test your max heart rate. If you're racing and you're following a good training plan, there should be times in the year usually where you either are doing like a hard test, or, for me, it's always that test is that like hot race in July when everyone's watching and the title's on the line. And you try and send it, right? And that's usually, this year didn't work out actually because it was really muddy and cold and like lower RPM and not, it wasn't like the race of my life. Whereas the year before was like quite a vigorous race, very competitive, very hot, higher cadence because it was dry conditions. So you typically, anyhow, those are sort of, all those stars should align. And that's, I think, a good situation where like you're not hitting max heart rate every day. That wouldn't be a good plan, if that makes sense. Right? You should have enough fatigue in your body a lot of the year that like you don't, and then also you're just not maxing out. We believe that, you don't max out, you save it.
Yeah.
Save it, right? Does that answer that?
Yeah, I think so. So I think like if you haven't checked in on your heart rate zones in quite a while, it might be time to just, not saying you have to go test them, just maybe take a look at them and sort of see like, do they still make sense?
And again, most people that are listening to this are going to be doing it. There might be somewhere someone I would say like you have to go out and do a 5 or a 20 or figure it out. Some people, I just did this the other day. Someone said, "Oh, I think I need to go," and I'm like, "Okay, you can confirm it, I guess." And I would just gradually ramp that up, right? And so you got to figure out a way that to like get the heart rate. So you have to warm up really well, and then sort of figure out the way that you're going to really ramp that heart rate up. And sometimes it can be fun, right? You've been focused on power or something, and you just keep trying to watch the heart rate and keep pushing it up. It can be dangerous, I guess, too, in some ways. All that to say, the way I would look at it is I just look at all the data. If you have a nice data pool, you can have a graph of your peak heart rates. We look, say 5-second peak, and you can look at the last 2 years, year, 28 days, 90 days, and just get a feel for like, what is the person hitting? And almost without fail, like most people, like it's, this is what they've hit in the last 2 years. And then it's usually within a couple beats for the last, 90 to 180 days. If they've done any sort of racing or competitive group ride or testing, most people are doing something.
Sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think we will wrap up there, but definitely, like I say, if you like this shorter format, definitely head over to consummateathlete.com or at consummateathlete on Instagram, or drop us a rating, review, a comment here on YouTube, any of these various modalities of getting in touch to let us know if you like this shorter form, if there are certain questions you have. Yeah. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we will see you next week. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Consummate Athlete podcast. If you want to hear more training, racing, and endurance sport advice, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating and review. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at consummateathlete.com for a weekly dose of inspiration and advice straight to your inbox.